Bonjour tout le monde! So in my previous video I spoke about everything you need to know about a, and when people start asking about a, they inevitably start asking about de, which works in very much the same way. There are so many similarities between these two prepositions that if you're happy with one, the other shouldn't seem too difficult, because you'll notice that the same things start coming up. The only problem is, you've got to learn when to use each one. So let's begin once again with the basics. The basic translation of de is either of or from, and once again it's a case of using the context to decide how to translate it. So, je viens d'Angleterre is obviously I come from England, not I come of it, because that just makes no sense. Whereas une vie de bonheur is obviously a life of happiness, not a life from it. So you've just got to read the sentence and decide which translation works best. Of course, de meaning of is also used to indicate possession. In French, we don't have the luxury of an apostrophe s, so we have to say the X of Y. For example, le chien de mes parents is the dog of my parents, or my parents' dog. Just as with a, when de comes across the definite article or the word the, it has to undergo some changes, and the patterns are very similar. De plus le becomes du. For example, les oreilles du chien, the ears of the dog, or the dog's ears. De la, like à la, does not change at all. For example, les habitants de la ville, the inhabitants of the town. De plus L' remains the same. Le chef de l'organisation is the head or the leader of the organization. And de les becomes des. Je suis le père des enfants. I am the father of the children. I should also point out that all of these can be used to mean some. And this tends to confuse people because quite often we learn that des means some, and this is true for something that we can count. For example, we have some animals is nous avons des animaux, and that's simple. What people struggle to understand is that you can also use du, de la, and de L' if you want something that you can't count. For example, cheese. If you want cheese, you can't say je veux des fromages, that's I want some cheeses. To say I want some cheese, you have to say je veux du fromage, because fromage is masculine singular. If you're talking about an uncountable thing that is feminine, we'll use de la. For example, il écoute de la musique. He is listening to some music. And likewise with de L', as-tu de l'eau? Do you have some water? So they can all be used to mean some. And again, context drives the translation. Just as we had before, you can sometimes see de le and de les. For example, in the sentence, il est difficile de les trouver. Now, I am going to go through this structure in a different video because it does require some extended explanations. But again, the reason that we have de les instead of des is because les in this case is not the definite article. It does not mean the. It's a direct object pronoun, which you can look up if you so wish. Some verbs are always followed by de and an infinitive, and a lot of people always ask me, how do I know whether it's verb de or verb a? And the answer is that you just have to learn. For example, to decide to do something is décider de faire quelque chose. It is never décider à faire quelque chose. That doesn't exist, and you simply have to learn that. And as I said in the previous video, the best thing to do is learn verbs with their prepositions. So don't think of to decide to do something as décider. Think of it as décider de. For example, j'ai décidé d'aller en vacances. I decided to go on holiday. To stop doing something is arrêter de faire quelque chose. Il a arrêté de fumer. He has stopped smoking. And finally, choisir de faire quelque chose is to choose to do something. Elle a choisi de passer la nuit avec moi. She chose to spend the night with me. Then, of course, we have the situation where a verb is followed by de and then a noun, which is inevitably a little bit more confusing. For example, to need something is avoir besoin de quelque chose, literally to have need of something. For example, you could say, j'ai besoin d'une nouvelle voiture. I need a new car, or I have need of a new car. S'occuper de quelque chose means to look after something, and of course you can also have s'occuper de quelqu'un, to look after someone, because you can look after people and things. For example, je dois m'occuper des enfants. I have to look after the children. Again, we have de plus les, which becomes des. Finally, parler de quelque chose is to speak about something or to speak of something. Je parle du restaurant cher. I'm speaking about the expensive restaurant. Remembering always to change de to du, de la, de l'apostrophe, or des. So as I said in the a video, I have already made an entire video on I and on, but because on is so closely related to de, I'm going to go through it in this video. So we know that to speak about something is parler de quelque chose. Je parle du restaurant. I'm speaking about the restaurant. When you ask people to say I'm speaking about it, they're tempted to say je le parle, because they know that je le fais is I do it. But je le parle is I speak it, which isn't the meaning we want to get across. We need to recognize the de in that sentence, or in this case the du. And so instead of using le, we'll use on. J'en parle. Literally, I, of it, speak. Another example is to go skiing, which in French is faire du ski, to do some skiing. So when you ask people to say I do it, still referring to doing the skiing, they say je le fais, because I do it is je le fais. But we only say that when the verb isn't followed by de. In this case it is faire du ski, and we have to recognize that. So we say j'en fais. We know that to need something is avoir besoin de quelque chose. J'ai besoin du stylo rouge. I need the red pen. So we can't say je l'ai besoin because the de has suddenly disappeared. So we have to say j'en ai besoin. And although the de isn't there anymore, the on is essentially representing it. I, of it, have need. On can be a little bit confusing when it means any, some, of it, or of them. For example, combien de stylos avez-vous is how many pens do you have? And quite often you'll ask an English student this, and their response will be j'ai trois. I have three, which in English is fine. We know from the context that we're still talking about the pens. In French you can't do this. The number wants to be followed by something in this case. J'ai trois what? So if you just want to say, I have three, what you have to say is I have three of them. You have to finish the sentence off. Unfortunately, the word order isn't quite the same. And in this case, we're going to use en. J'en ai trois. Now that we have this en, the trois doesn't want to be followed by anything, because we've already said, I have three of them. J'en ai trois. Likewise, as-tu du fromage? Do you have any cheese? A lot of people will say, j'ai, I have. But again, it needs to be followed by something. We can't just say, j'ai, I have. What do you have? So instead you have to say, I have some, which again is j'en ai. If you want to reply negatively, I don't have any, you'll just say, je n'en ai pas. I don't have some, or I don't have any. En, of course, can also mean in when we're talking about feminine countries. Je suis en France, I'm in France. Je suis en Angleterre. And it's also used with the present participle, for which I already have a video if you want to go and check that one out. Next we have dans, which seems to strike fear into the hearts of French students everywhere. But all you've got to remember is that it's just a relative pronoun for de. De is still a preposition, so we can't end a sentence with it. A lot of people, when asked to say the thing that I need, will say la chose que j'ai besoin de. Very good for recognizing that we might need to use que instead of qui, but you can't end the sentence with de. It's just not possible in French. And so instead of qui or que, you'll use dont. La chose dont j'ai besoin. Again, it's a case of recognizing the fact that this verb, or in this case this phrase, is followed by de. Earlier on we spoke of parler de quelque chose, meaning to speak of something or to speak about something. We said je parle du restaurant. If you wanted to say the restaurant that I'm talking about, or the restaurant about which I'm talking, we'll use dont. Do not say le restaurant que je parle de. C'est le restaurant dont je parle. Remember, to look after was s'occuper de quelque chose or s'occuper de quelqu'un. The animals that I'm looking after are les animaux dont je m'occupe, not les animaux que je m'occupe de. Please, if you only remember one thing, it's that de cannot end a sentence. In the video about I spoke about using à qui for people rather than the rather impersonal auquel, à laquelle, auquel, and auquel. Now, de qui similarly does exist, and you will quite often hear people saying la personne de qui je parle rather than la personne dont je parle, because de qui just gives it a little bit more of a personal feel. However, I researched this and found that dont is technically preferable. I'm sure l'Académie Française would tell you to say la personne dont je parle, but in modern society, de qui is used an awful lot, and at the end of the day, it's just a case of choosing which one you prefer. Next we have duquel, de laquelle, desquels, and desquels, which I have to admit can be quite confusing because it's quite often difficult to know whether to use dont or duquel, de laquelle, desquels, desquels, because they seem to serve the same purpose. They are essentially relative pronouns. Now, there is some discrepancy over which ones to use when, even amongst French people, so don't worry too much about this. But generally, as a rule of thumb, dont should be used with verbs followed by de, as we saw with s'occuper de, avoir besoin de, parler de, etc., whereas duquel and all of its forms are used with prepositional phrases that contain the word de. For example, next to is à côté de, in which case your relative pronoun will be duquel, de laquelle, etc., rather than dont. So, for example, the shop next to which I live has closed is le magasin à côté duquel, next to which, j'habite, I live, a fermé, has closed. Le magasin à côté duquel j'habite a fermé. Likewise, près de is close to, which isn't entirely dissimilar. For example, la maison près de laquelle j'ai trouvé votre portefeuille. The house next to which I found your wallet. Près de laquelle, not près dont. Dont is a very verbal thing. Duquel is a very prepositional thing. Finally, we have a few more fiddly little situations, and it seems that penser once again is causing a little bit of trouble. We know that penser à quelque chose means to think about something in terms of sitting down and having a jolly old think about it. Penser de is to think about something in terms of having an opinion on it. For example, if I say qu'est-ce que tu en penses, I'm saying what do you think of it, as in what is your opinion on it. Qu'est-ce que tu penses de ma nouvelle robe? What do you think of my new dress? Not thinking of something in terms of thinking about it in your mind, more about having an opinion. Then we have the issue of questions, which shouldn't really be an issue if you know about you know that we simply stick the preposition at the start. So, de quoi parlez-vous is about what, or what are you speaking about. De qui es-tu jaloux? Who are you jealous of? Of whom are you jealous? And there we have de in a 13.5-minute nutshell. As usual, if you have any questions, do let me know via email, message, whatever you want. And until the next video, à bientôt!